Yeah, because they're a private company, so they
Generally, everybody tell you.
Back to the MOU that we just signed off, we can't find any record, any reciprocal in there, so indemnifying us when we get around this one.
They just aren't.
They just yeah, you'll just.
Hello? Hello?
Should.
Hello. Excellent. So thank you everybody for coming. This is a little ad hoc committee meeting of me and Councilmember Dramov. I'm Councilmember Baron, Councilmember Dramov, and this is about establishing a Rule 20A undergrounding district. So Rule 20A is a sort of a PG&E fund. We have $600,000 or $700,000 to underground power lines of public importance. And so here we're going to talk about undergrounding a project that is undergrounding specifically the power lines around the Del Mar parking lot. So take it away.
Comment to add. Certainly appreciate all of you being here. And I know that undergrounding is a topic that a lot of people have a lot of passion about and do want to talk about, but we are requesting that we just focus on this one area because that's what we're talking about for this meeting. So it's not undergrounding in general for the city, just about this specific area at the Del Mar parking lot at the foot of Ocean Avenue. Thanks.
Good evening. So my name is Javier Hernandez. I'm a project manager with the city of Carmel-by-the-Sea. And I've been working with representatives at PG&E to get this program moving in the right direction. So this is a little bit of background and where we're headed with this program. So I just prepared some slides and I'll work right through them. So the Rule 20 program is a program that was established by PG&E. This was established back in 1967 through CPUC, and they created 3 different brackets of programs with this. This is the Rule 20A, which is the one that we're talking about here, the Rule 20B, and the Rule 20C. The 20A takes into account, as you can see, it's not a public program, but it's funded from ratepayers. So this is money that we pay into PG&E, so it goes back into the community. 20B is for like new developments, subdivisions and such, so it doesn't really apply here. And then 20C is a program that's more privately funded. So it's like if you're undergrounding your home, PG&E will facilitate you and a neighbor maybe going in on a project, but this is all privately funded. So with Rule 20A, the critical part, or the initial critical part, is that you become an active community. Right now, Carmel has the designation as inactive. So what happens is that back when the program was acquiring funds, the ratepayers were paying into it. at one point in March of 2022, Carmel-by-the-Sea had initial credits of almost 1 million. They're called credits, not actual money, but it's dollar to credit. So it kind of relates to it that way. So then March 2023, we were informed that 175,000 credits were reallocated to 14 cities. So they started removing credits from inactive communities and reallocating them to communities where projects were moving forward and they were getting into construction. So they were, in essence, taking credits from communities that weren't doing anything and reallocating it to communities that were proactive with the program. So since then, they've also taken another 143,000. So right now, the remaining credit balance is 667,639. And the CPUC actually in 2 years ago, I think it might be on my next slide, but they put a halt to, so they discontinued authorization of new credits in December of 2022. And then in June of 2023, they halted the reallocation of credits. They were getting a lot of feedback from communities that were losing credits. So they said, wait, we got to figure this out. So they put a halt to it, and they called a timeout on the program. So not to say that the projects that were moving forward stopped, but the reallocation of the funding that was there was halted. So cities like Carmel-by-the-Sea still has the same balance that they did back then. With that, PG&E also, the CPUC ordered PG&E and other electric providers to formulate a way of reallocating credits that they determined to be fair. And so that advice letter, which is called the Tier 2 advice letter, is due to the CPUC by December of 2024. So that's coming up here shortly. So here are some steps that how cities like Carmel-by-the-Sea can become active. So we're here for the first step. We have to find a suitable underground district, which the area that we're going to present here checks all the boxes. It has to have a minimum of 600 feet in longitudinal length, and the cost has to be approximately $500,000. And then the city has to, at a council meeting, they have to adopt the resolution stating such, forming an underground district. And then at that point, PG&E, what they'll do is they'll change, it's basically switching the designation from inactive to active. The funding remains with the city of Carmel till the project moves forward. Here's the district that we're talking about. So it's the area of Ocean Avenue from San Antonio down west all the way through the Del Mar parking lot. So it's approximately, it's hard to see here, but it's approximately 800 feet in length, and it covers, I believe, 6 or 7 poles. So this district is formulated kind of like as a approximate district boundary. At this point, this project hasn't entered the planning stages with PG&E yet. So what you do is you make sure that you create an area big enough that you can encapsulate at least their minimum requirements, which is the 600 feet and the 500,000 cost. So this is the area that was done. We took a couple visits out there and kind of analyzed the situation. And here's a couple of the qualifying characteristics that PG&E looks for. So importantly, it has to serve the public in a way. So this one passes through a civic or public recreation area. It carries a high volume of pedestrian and vehicular traffic. They prefer that it's in the street right away, and arterial roads is a big win for them. And also that it, in most cases, alleviates ADA restrictions, so which in this case, removing the poles along the north end of the street would facilitate access for pedestrians. Oh, and it's important to note that this location has already been vetted by PG&E, and it's been approved as a potential district. So here's, I listed a couple of the benefits. The power lines, of course, this is important here, but power lines would be removed. All the other lines associated with the poles, communication lines, there's fiber telephone lines. So all that gets undergrounded. So the view shed, it clears up the view shed in the area. Also, as we know, the utilities go underground, so they're not susceptible to storm events, which include rain and heavy winds. And then, and the third one, which is really important, is it allows for accessibility for pedestrians and wheelchairs and to be able to navigate through the area. One of the drawbacks is cost, right? So with the program would fund up to the private right-of-way. So it takes into account everything in the public right-of-way, but it would be the neighbors or the owner's responsibility to underground their own facilities. So that can range in cost anywhere from $15,000 to $25,000, depending on the complexity of the services that you have in those residents. And this is the last slide, but the reason that we're here at this ad hoc meeting is to recommend that the ad hoc committee members take, when we present it at council, that they support the idea and formulate this district on Ocean Avenue between San Antonio West to the Del Mar parking lot. And then I'll just leave this up, but if there's any questions, glad to answer them.
Thank you, Javier. I've got 2 questions for you. Have you been in touch? Oh.
Make sure you're using that.
Thanks. Got it. Thank you, Javier, for your presentation. I've got 2 questions. One is, have you been in touch with PG&E recently to make sure that we have not lost any more money from that total, the $667,000?
Right. So, I mean, it's PG&E, right? But I was in communication with the liaison as late as, I think it was last Wednesday. So as of right now, nothing has been reallocated from the funding that was frozen almost a year and a half now.
Okay, great. And then my other question is this, and the reason we formed this ad hoc committee and pulled this from the full council meeting, which was in December of 2023, I believe, November, was this forming of this underground district. Because once we do that, those property owners are going to be liable to be paying that $15,000 to $25,000, or maybe even more. Sometimes it's $30,000 for the doing it on their inside their property. So
correct.
We want to reach out to those people. Can you tell us about your outreach efforts and if you've had success in notifying every one of those people that would be affected and would have to pay for this?
We have made efforts to notify the people. We sent mailers out to them. We actually, we just did a site walk on, what was it, September 10th? We did a sidewalk, Chip and Brandon and myself, and we knocked out all the houses, but you know, we had, I think, 1 person answer the door, so we didn't really have too much success. Before we went to council a year or so ago, we also did the same kind of outreach, and we were able to contact a different neighbor, but it's been slow. You know?
Well, see, this is where my concern is, because my concern is if we pass this as a council, and we have to do this because we have to do this before December 24, 2024, what happens if a homeowner then afterwards says, oh, I didn't know about it, I didn't hear about it, I don't want to be part of it, or I don't want to have to pay for it? I'm concerned about that, so what more can we do?
Well, I mean, as far as outreach, we can do more to outreach to these residents that are in the area. I think the critical thing here is that by creating this district, essentially what we're doing is we're changing our classification from inactive to active. So this project moves to a planning stage. Although it was selected and not approved, but selected as a district to move forward, it's still, it's dynamic. You can change the district boundaries. The city can choose to actually abandon that location altogether and pursue a different location. So it's just, you become an active community in the program.
Okay, and I'm sorry, one last thing I just thought of as you spoke is if there are people who live on Scenic from Ocean south to 8th, and if for some reason they want to join this, could we expand that district?
During the planning stages, that's when this would get analyzed. Again, we only have 660,000 credits, which is the limiting fund. I mean, the district can expand and contract as we need it during the planning stage. But as of now, the intersection of San Antonio and Ocean and headed west was the more viable and easiest, not easiest, but just more practical.
Okay, so perhaps if they wanted to join, they might have to be responsible for paying for more than if they were part of it.
I mean, there's various ways the city can contribute to expanding on a program, right? So the city can create a project like a CIP project per se to go along with the Rule 20 program. So it's not defined as an independent project, and it can only be, that has to be the determining limits. There's room for fluctuation if we want to go down scenic as opposed to stay on ocean, there's a possibility to do that as well.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. I'll just pass it along.
I don't know, is there any others that is directly affected?
Your name, you gotta.
Oh, I'm Doug Helene. My wife owns the property, one up from the ocean, 3 southwest of Scenic. I guess the question becomes, is there anyone else that's in this elite group of, oh.
I'm right across the street from you.
You're a, pardon?
You said 3 Southwest Scenic?
Well, yes, we're on Ocean.
You're on Ocean Avenue.
We're on Ocean Avenue, yeah. So is there anyone else that's affected? Yes?
We're down Scenic towards 8.
Okay, all right, this is,
So what I'm saying is, what she said, supposedly the area could be expanded.
could be expanded. Now, could it be expanded during this initial flight, or is that subsequent to this initial flight?
Well, what PG&E asks is that you present a practical area or perimeter of a project that will work. So if the area expands down and it, a couple hundred feet, then you're turning a project that could potentially be 600,000 into a project that's 1.2 million. So at that point, it's not really a practical project for PG&E. So they ask that they have, I think, a rule of thumb is, what was it, $1,000 for every foot. So you try to keep the project. So this project's already been presented to PG&E.
Yes.
And they said this project will get a thumbs up, and this is
So any expansion would have to come subsequent to this?
right. We would have to get PG&E approval to that.
Okay,
and the
all
funding
right.
would
So
have to
no
be-
one else is at this point directly affected by this?
Yeah, there's five homes.
Yes.
Sorry, don't get involved. So to be clear, Javier, if you brought up that map again, there are 5 single-family dwellings, as Councilmember Dramov was referencing, that would be responsible for a service lateral to the properties. So from the underground wires to their properties. There's one on the corner it's in the district, the 6th house, but it's already underground, so they wouldn't have any other impacts or benefits. Well, they would have the benefit of the view shed, obviously, but they wouldn't have any impacts.
Okay, I've got it. So the question becomes, A, is it going to require the approval of all of the owners? And is there any decision that has to be made by the owners other than yes? So is this a requirement?
Like,
I mean, is this, if you will, an eminent domain example? Okay. You have to do it if this project is approved by the city.
Yeah, so it's a good question. So I'll tee off of what Javier said, and Javier, jump in if I'm wrong on any of this. But we're sort of like stage 1 of this, and stage 1 of this is to create a boundary on a map that the city council has to say, yes, this is our project. And then the city council will be involved, and the community, of course, too, with a project, moving the project forward, designing the project. And there's going to be still more outreach. Like Javier said, he and Chip and I walked around, knocked on the doors. We were able to get in touch with you, which was great. Exactly, yeah. Yeah, but we met him. And so we'll continue to try to get in touch with all the property owners because, one of the things we'll ask from council when we go there to adopt this district is, how do you want to implement this project? Do you want to get 100% buy-off? Do you want to go down the eminent domain process? It's likely a no, but that's not for us as staff. That's for the ultimate city council to decide how they want to approach this. If they can get buy-in from every single property owner on there, then that certainly makes the project easier. But what the city needs to do before the end of December is to get a district in place so that we secure that money, so then we can move forward and decide how we want to implement the project, if we want to implement the project. Is that a fair way to explain it?
yeah, you're right.
Okay. I think Carrie.
Hi, Carrie White. I have a couple questions. If we have 673,000 and we're using 500, is there any way to tap into that 163,000 and share it among the 5 houses? That's one question. 2, if it's 30,000 house times 5 is 150,000, is there any way we could float a bond and these people can then pay over a period of time instead of shelling out 30 grand at one time? And then my other question is, does the house across the street share in these electrical wires?
There's no houses across the street.
Okay, because she said she lives across the house.
Sorry, I thought he was on scene.
Okay, so these wires service 5 individual properties. So, okay, that was my last question. So, yeah, I'm wondering why we're not using all 673,000, if we can tap into that.
They'll explain, it'll be more.
So just clarification, the project minimums is 500,000. It's too early in the process to get a fair assessment of what the costs would actually be. So it could potentially be 800,000.
You might have to subsidize some of the whole project.
And the city could subsidize the service laterals if they chose to. So we could use, theoretically, if there were money left over, Dr. White.
Borrow that mic for him. Thank you. Sorry. There's people on Zoom.
Yeah,
who wanna make sure.
so theoretically, if there were money left over, it could be used to provide for the service laterals. And again, that's where it comes off the main transmission line to the individual houses or properties. Tasha, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted clarification. So when, I understand we're trying to be an active community by picking a project, and this project makes a lot of sense, and PG&E has already qualified it. My question for the homeowners is, so PG&E couldn't install this project and they could hook up their laterals later? Or, can it just be like dead in the street and then they hook up when they want to hook up, or they have to hook up at the time of this project?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It has to, once the project, they have to get an agreement into undergrounding the homes. So once the project goes forward, the homes have to be undergrounded.
So PG&E does need an agreement from the 7 homeowners to do this project?
Correct.
And how much time do they, is there a timeline?
I'd have to research that. There is a timeline for them to enter an agreement. I'll try to dig it up. I have documentation on that.
Could you conceivably be, you picked the project, it's active, you don't have the agreement from the homeowners, but you're working on reaching out with them, but money is not being taken away from the credits because it's active.
Right.
And maybe there's not a deadline to the active, who knows? And so there's time.
Right. So right now, all inclinations are pointing to the horizon date of 2033 on this program. So Rule 20 will completely go away by 2033.
So we have time for our city or homeowners financing of this project for a good 9 years.
As Brandon indicated, this is step 1 to get into the active stage. At that point, it goes into a planning kind of project overview. So they analyze all different aspects of it. But there is time once the city becomes an active community.
Anybody else have any questions? No.
Thank you. I'm Mel Alborn. I understand this project the city's been aware of it for several years, maybe back till 2021. And I think Councilmembers Baron and Dramov deserve some credit when last November at Council they put a pause because they were concerned about how this project would impact property owners in Carmel. That's part of your job and responsibility, and I think that was well done. That was 11 months ago. And you tell me that you've got 5 single-family dwellings that you need to communicate with. It's been 11 months, folks. You've got 4 weeks left, and you're going to be bringing this back to council. And what I'm wondering is, how are you going to present differently in 4 weeks what you didn't have 11 months ago? So that's my first question, and it is a serious question. And then my second question is this, and it has to do with the fundamental creation of the Rule 20A program, which was, with Governor Reagan back in '67, his concept was California should be beautiful. And money ought to be made available to allow communities to underground some of these electrical poles so that we can, it's a beautification program. That beautification program also has been halted. So Rule 20A is changing going forward. Ratepayers will no longer be charged to beautify neighborhoods that aren't theirs. But we still have the benefit of some of those funds. Now I said all of that, and now I forget what my question was. But let's go back, if we could, to how will you address these 5 dwelling? Oh, I remember. If we're going to beautify the whole town, if the Rule 20A funds are for public interest, all public interest, then why isn't the cost to do those lateral tie-ins spread across the whole city? You don't get the question? Well, the idea is to select a project in a location that is heavily trafficked, right, by the public, and has an awful lot of tourism interest. Well, that's really what you selected, right, in terms of the parking lot down at Del Mar. So if it is in the great public interest, then why wouldn't the public cover the full cost, including those tie-ins for the individual property owners? It's just a question. I'm not really promoting it one way or the other, but I think it ought to be considered when you look at the very nature of the Rule 20A program and why it was created.
I can only give you my impression from the meeting that we had last year was that the Rule 20A funds cannot be used to underground private laterals. Like there's a rule about that. The city could absolutely do that. That is a question for the 5 of us to talk about next month. I'm not sure that we need to talk about it next month as opposed to next year or the following year.
But it held you up last year, though. I mean, it held you up for 11 months. That's, Mayor Pro Tem Richards made a motion and he rescinded it in order to give time for y'all to check in with the 5 single-family dwellings.
Yeah, and so we have tried to the best of our ability to do that, to get people here. So we are, what I can say, we are where we are. I would also note that we had another undergrounding district over by Ridgewood, which we have sort of taken off the table because we thought that project, so back in November of last year, whenever it was, of November of last year, we had talked about doing 2 districts, and we have removed one of them because we didn't think that the 2 of us are not recommending that one because we did not think that the other one was practical. We didn't think it met enough of the conditions that PG&E has set for us, and that there were too many homes involved, and that the distances of the laterals were too great to make it work because of the geography of the other project.
So how, Councilmember Baron, Councilmember Baron, so how then in 4 weeks are you going to report on communicating with the property owners? Or are you simply planning to go forward without that element fully fleshed out, and then you'll work on that later?
So we will go forward without that fully fleshed out, and we will work on that later, and we will come to a resolution later.
Yeah, so we do numerous, back to your question, we do numerous noticing methods. We do mailed notices to property owners, and obviously not all property owners live here. So they could live in Philadelphia or Chicago or, fill in the blank. We had a woman who lived in Singapore recently at a council meeting virtually. We do the mailed notices. We do the hand delivery. We do posting notices. So you see notices that are posted. We would post our property, which are the telephone poles, basically the right of way, just to try. This is a better turnout, to be honest with you, than we thought we'd have. So thank you all for coming. So, but we'll just continue to do that. There were lights on in some of the houses, but no one was home, literally. So we'll continue to do that outreach and education. But again, It's not like this project's going to go off this year, probably next year, or maybe 2 years from now. And I think we've got enough time to answer your question, ma'am, to make sure that we connect with those property owners and can make an informed recommendation to the council on how to pay for those service laterals. Because in some cases, when you open up a view, it's going to, you know, as we all know, opening up a view can increase the value of a property by not just $15,000, but by $150,000. So again, but you have my word that we'll continue to do that outreach. Yeah. So this is this is a live. You're in a live broadcast right now, and it's being recorded. So this will go on our web page for this particular topic, and then people do have the opportunity to come in by Zoom and offer their questions or comments to the ad hoc committee. So, Yvette, are we ready for anybody on?
Yes, Mr. McWelters, go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Just to follow on this conversation, you know, about a year ago, senior planner Marnie Waffle was telling us about the demographics in our village. She said 25% of the folks that live in Carmel, have significant difficulty every month paying their bills. That's 805 residents. And then another 25% has difficulty paying their bills. So my question is, these folks don't have 15 to 25,000 sitting there to pay for this hookup. So we need to think about how we're going to accomplish this when some of the folks are in this demographic. But as far as my prepared remarks, Councilmember Dramov, at last week's City Council meeting, you mentioned today's meeting, and as part of your announcement, you said there's a lot of passion about undergrounding, and that today's meeting is only about the Del Mar parking lot. After reading the staff report for today's meeting, I realized the Public Works Department does not share our passion about undergrounding, and it speaks to an attitude at Public Works and at City Hall that's completely out of step with the village's passion about undergrounding. Mr. Harari, if Mr. Harari is there, I saw you, Mr. Rarick. Why doesn't Public Works and City Hall share the village's passion about undergrounding the overhead utility wires? Why is Public Works and City Hall out of step with our village? Public Works and City Hall needs to get on the same page with Dale Burns, CarmelUnderground.org. Mr. Harari and Mr. Rarick, I recommend you and your staff go to CarmelUnderground.org and read this quote from Dale Byrne, quote, "When neighbors work together with a passion for mutual values, including transparent government that is open to residents' voices, great things can happen," unquote. Mr. Harari and Mr. Rarick, why don't you and your staff share our passion for mutual values? In a spirit of transparency, Mr. Rarick and Mr. Harari, please explain, in March of 2021, when PG&E notified the city that they reallocated $5,407 or 7 credits of the city's credits to an underfunded but active undergrounding construction project for the city of Live Oak, the alarm bells did not go off at Public Works and at City Hall to get off the dime and tell City Attorney Perrick and our City Council to immediately begin the process of establishing the Carmel Underground Utility District to utilize the Rule 20A allocations. Why did the staff wait 7 months until October of 21 to recommend the City Council add the Underground Utilities Rule 20A project to the Council's strategic priorities list? Why wasn't the recommendation made immediately in March of 2021 to begin the process immediately to establish an underground utility district so we would not lose any more PG&E credits? Then 12 months later in October of 22, and then in January of 23, another 796,000 of the city's credits were reallocated to 14 other cities. City Administrator Rarick, what were you and your staff and Public Works staff doing in these intervening 12 months that you and your staff did not immediately establish as a first priority the establishment of a Carmel Underground Utility District so we wouldn't lose any more credits? What was more important that you put off taking care of this? To me, City Hall's intransigence speaks to an underlying adversarial attitude against the residents, and it's becoming a pattern. We had a similar experience with our staff representing Sacramento in the drafting of our housing element document when staff described our city-owned parking lots as underutilized. And in the process, staff did not employ using the Surplus Lands Act to protect our city-owned parking lots. And in conclusion, City Hall and our current City Council continues to represent Sacramento to us instead of representing us to Sacramento. And the voters on November the 5th need to express their anger about the status quo by completely changing the makeup of our City Council. Thank you.
Well, I have a little different approach. I want to thank you very much for convening this meeting and for considering getting rid of these power lines at the parking lot. I think it will be wonderful for our community. It will be wonderful for all the tourists that come to visit Carmel. My name is Sally Edsel, and I live on Scenic. There is a group of us who have been working together, one in particular who is not here today, working with PG&E to try to get the power lines between Ocean and 8th buried. That's the remaining segment of Scenic that still has power lines. And, we fully understand this will improve our views and will be much nicer, and we are willing to participate financially to make this happen, but we would love to dovetail onto your project at the parking lot, and possibly if there are any grant monies that could be applied to Scenic, I think would be fantastic, because Scenic is a very, very busy pedestrian walkway. A lot of people enjoy that street, and I think it would make it a much prettier walkway for our city and our visitors. So thank you very much, and I appreciate all you're doing.
Thank you, Sally.
Will you let Mr. McWalters know that we did hear him? I don't think he realized.
Yes, Mr. McWalters, we heard you.
So a number of years ago, before I was involved with it, some homeowners got together and put together a project to underground power lines on San Antonio from the Pebble Gate 3 poles to the south. And I know that the city went for a walk, Mayor Potter, Administrator Rarig, and Bob Harari, Public Works Director, at least, and had conversations with them at least once, maybe twice. It's documented in the paperwork. And for some reason, even though this was the perfect time to pick a project, and it would have been the perfect project because it checks all the boxes, and it actually probably would have been a little under $500,000, but everything goes over budget. So for some reason, the city said, no, why don't you guys go off and do this on your own, which they attempted to do. After taking the project almost to fruition, they were ready to dig trenches. They came up just a little bit short of the total price, and I have all that documentation. So they killed the project. We're talking, they were ready to dig the trench. They had it through engineering, they had construction contracts, and they came up just a little bit short. And Jim Pelios, who managed the project brilliantly, just said, I can't fund this. The neighbors just couldn't come up with enough money. I believe the city knew this whole thing was happening throughout, yet they did nothing. They could have just picked that project at that point and said, tell you what, we'll make it our 28 project and we'll do that project and we'll pay for the whole thing, or you guys come up with the money. They probably had $500,000 that they had raised. We'll put our money in to make up the difference. It turns out that we've now extended that project 3 more poles, so now it's a 6-pole project. Some of it's complicated, but we're about to come out of engineering. We've got a special program using a public benefit concept with a 501c3. There's about a 40% discount on the project. So we're going to find out soon how it's going to be paid for, but the project's going to be funded by the neighbors. We've already contacted 24 neighbors. We have letters from 24 neighbors, not 5, 24. And it turns out only 2 houses need to be undergrounded because all the rest of them have already been done. So if you want a good project, that's a good project, and it's not too late to take it on because it will not cost the city a penny because we already will raise all the money if there's a difference.
and then you can go around the corner and do the other project later. I checked with PG&E, and they think that it's possible. We'd have to start the project over again, but it's about to come out of engineering, so that's just paperwork. So in other words, once we started the project as a 28 project, the thing would fly through because there's really nothing left to do. We're about to go out to contractors. We just re-upped with Wallace. We have a Wallace engineer, the same company the city uses. They're doing all the engineering, so it would dovetail in nicely. And I know this is late in the game, but the truth is we've had 118 meetings at Carmel Cares with Public Works, and there are usually 10 people on the meeting, including some senior leaders in the city. For the last 15 meetings, maybe, the first slide is talking about this project. So this is not a secret. And Javier, you've been on some of the meetings. Bob's been on every one of the meetings. Brandon has been in most of the meetings. So clearly it's been out there to be done. It's just shocking that we could have taken 5-6 years and not come up with a project. It's not that complicated, considering that residents are bringing their project to the finish line. So I don't know where this question is headed, but it's just rather shocking. That's all I can say.
It sounds like the project's been picked late, but we have a new letter from PG&E that they will take more reallocations sometime after December. So now we have this crunch to pick a project, and it looks like the research has been done for this project to qualify for PG&E and that we have more time with the homeowners. So I support this project because PG&E already okayed it, and it fits all the qualifiers of being the most scenic and being the most arterial route, which were the conditions. But I do think, I personally am feeling like, what happened? I think as far as the citizen funds being removed from the original 1 million, like I think we deserve to have an answer of why that funding was taken away or lost when it's been known about for a very long time. I've heard a lot of people say it, so I think you should address it. Does anybody else feel that way?
I guess the good news and the bad news is the only reason that I'm here is because my tenant was home when they knocked on the door. Bad news, I'm the only one here from this district. And I guess if this project has been out there for some time, it wasn't but about 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago that my tenant called and said, oh, by the way, Chip Rarig stopped by the house to talk about underground. So we as owners had no idea that this project was being considered and or being the possibility of implemented. So I can agree with the young lady at the end of why in the world has it taken all this time to get to this point. Now, again, the bad news is that I know that the first 3 houses in this project are all rentals. Okay, they're all rentals. And I'm not sure who owns Tom Wolf's old house now. I think they live in Pebble Beach, or they did live in Pebble Beach, and it's a rental. We've, for the last 6-8 years, have been doing a yearly rental in our house. And I know that the house up from us on the street, it's owned by a family that rents it on a month-to-month basis. The one up from that one, which is probably the 4th house, I don't know what the status of that is. But I think there's got to be a lot more communication, a lot more information, and before this even seriously gets considered. And again, with this 28 potential money expiring or being atrophied as it has been over the past number of years, I'm a little disappointed in speaking for my wife to say that, I think the city could have done a better job. Okay? My next question is, let's say that this project goes to completion. who are we dealing with? The city, or are we dealing with PG&E?
What do you mean by completion?
Well,
Who's going to manage the project?
who's the contractor that we're supposed to end up paying? The city, or the contractor PG&E hires?
So PG&E would be, they would be responsible for the improvements on the public right-of-way. So they would hire the contractors for the improvements. They would do the engineering for all the improvements in the private right-of-way. The private property facilities, PG&E, whatever undergrounding needs to happen, that's the responsibility of the property owner at this stage in the project. So the property owner can hire, they can go out there and hire their own contractor if they choose to. Or it could be brought together as a group, put out as a project. You know, there's various ways to approach the project at that point.
This is when the project. So this means, in essence, then when the project is completed, it's pay when the job is done. This is not any possibility of being an assessment on the property. 2, what happens with Comcast? Same? Okay. So again, I got to be sure, because we're dealing with you and PG&E. I haven't heard the word Comcast or AT&T come into the conversation, because Comcast had to run their line across Ocean Avenue about 3 years ago because it was deteriorated. So we wouldn't want another situation where we would have to deal with Comcast on running that.
No, PG&E owns the power line, they own the poles. They would underground the entire, there'd be the lead agency on undergrounding the entire.
Let me be clear. Comcast is across the street. So I'm not sure if that's on the PG&E power or not, if that's on the same power pole. It is on the same pole. So then I'm assuming then that Comcast would have to work with the contractor and PG&E to underground their lines.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
PG&E would be the lead agency, their engineering team would be the lead engineers, and they would ensure that enough conduit is put underground for all the dry utilities that are up on the power poles at this point.
Okay. So to continue on, I believe that it's important that all 5 of the owners have input as it relates to this major decision that's going to have to take place, and not moi. Now, I do know that the people that are one up from us, when I told her that Chip had stopped by, I scanned and sent her the information about the last meeting, which unfortunately was delayed. And I told her that this meeting was happening as well, but I gather she's not on. She's not on, okay. She's not on our Zoom. Okay, so I'm not gonna speak for the other 4. So I think, nope. Nobody else is on Ocean.
Maybe has any questions?
Yeah.
I do. This doesn't even concern me, but so the price is anywhere from $15,000 to $30,000 per home. When will you guys have a number? So
Those are the numbers.
15 to 30, they just have to accept a range?
Has anybody, Andy, you built houses. Has anybody done a project recently? Oh, Tasha, I bet you could break it out, right? So our estimates, what we did was we contacted electricians and we said, if the service lateral is about 20 feet, 25 feet, how much would it cost? And they said between $15,000 and $20,000. Now, we increased it just to make sure that we didn't underbid it or underestimate it. So I'm not sure where the 30 grand came from, but 15 to 20. So, but again, as we talked to Doug, you can hire any electrician you want, and it's you know, whatever the cost, go with the lowest bid. I mean, that's what people do all the time. And Dale's built a lot of houses, and so he can tell you exactly what a service lateral is. But again, it's based on the distance between where the main is and your service panel. If the service panel has to be upgraded, that's the box with all the little switches in it, then it might cost a little bit more. But again, as I said earlier, the council does have, we can't use the Rule 20A funding for those service laterals, but in some communities, the city has subsidized. They've helped pay for the service laterals for those people. Anybody know where Del Monte Beach neighborhood is in Monterey, off Del Monte, across from the Naval Postgraduate School? If you drive up there, that entire neighborhood was undergrounded, and every property owner, with the exception of one, paid for their own service lateral to be undergrounded. So it's a, you know, beautiful vista of the ocean, right on the ocean. And what they did was all the other property owners, and there's a couple hundred property owners up there, they all pitched in to have that one house. So again, I don't think it's, I hear your frustration. I don't think it's something you have to answer today, but I think this is really good input that we can carry on to the council if there's a recommendation from the ad hoc to the full council. And rather than delaying it any further, we're hoping to get on the November 5th agenda so the council can adopt a resolution and we continue this process. How's that, Doug? So Doug, why don't we turn to Mr. Byrne real fast, and then we'll get back to you.
Okay, so the way that it works is PG&E Engineering kicks back their design for the main trench, and then your engineer, in our case Wallace Group, would then contact Comcast and all the other utilities besides PG&E, and then they design the conduit for what they need, so it's sort of a separate piece. And then that all gets put together, and then you get a bid with the contractor to do the whole project. So I understand, and again, we haven't got to this point. We only have 2 in our project that have to go underground, so it's not a big deal. Do you have to go across the parking lot, Chip? So they can maybe water jet it, who knows? But our run is a lot smaller. You know, it's just a normal street. So back when I did undergrounding, and I undergrounded all of the houses that I built, 5 of them, PG&E was willing at the time, if you did a project like this, to fund part of that project. At the time, I think it was 50%. So there could be some funding to reduce the cost of those connections, because clearly they want that to happen in order for the project to go through. Back when I was doing mine, to just do a run from the pole to the house, because it wasn't very long, it wasn't much at all, maybe $5 grand. It seems like a lot, but it's a long ways. I mean, that's all the way across Del Mar parking lot. This is not a normal across the street kind of thing. But it sounds high to me, but 15 maybe, 25 sounds high. I wouldn't be happy if I was a homeowner. So, by the way, I think we should do what Tasha said and what Administrator Rarig said and approve this project, because we cannot afford to lose any more money. So, I mean, this is all we have. I would love to donate the project that I'm working on, but it might take too long. We don't have time. So let's just pass a project and get this thing moving. Figure out the rest later.
I'm sorry, it's bothering me. I need an answer to the question. Can you tell me, because I would say it was about 2021 that, you know, you had to pick a project, and it was either active or inactive, and we didn't. Can you kind of tell me some of the obstacles so we don't repeat ourselves?
I'm sorry, Tasha, but I wasn't around in 2021. Like, you're asking us specifically the approach the city took back then, right?
So who would answer that? Can you rephrase the question? Yeah, I can rephrase the question. So when it was about 2021 that the Rule 20A came to our laps, and we had $1 million in the fund, and we just needed to pick a project to be active, but we didn't. And now it's 2024, 4 months before this deadline is happening. So could you just tell me some of the obstacles why we haven't picked a project in that amount of time?
one of the topics that Councilmember Dramov and I talk about at our weekly updates are what I love the term, so I'm going to parrot it, but these generational issues. So, has anybody been to Flanders Mansion? Brandon's going to hate this. We bought Flanders Mansion 8 years before Brandon was born. So we have this little mansion, and it's in great shape. It's not falling down. I'll take anybody on a tour almost anytime you want to go. It's a short tour. It's a big house. We own a 34-acre nature preserve. We have a 1-mile pristine beach, which is pristine because the council invests in it. But we've got staircases and revetments and seawalls that were built in the mid-'80s, and they are failing because we didn't reinvest in them. So to answer your question, it was a matter of priorities. So on a twice yearly basis, the council gets together and the public's always invited. Councilmember Dramov, how many people do we usually get? And Mr. Byrne comes, but we don't get a whole lot of people, even though we advertise the heck of it. Brandon always says there's 2 real opportunities for the community to set the future year for the council. One is when we set our priority goals, and the second is the budgeting. And unfortunately, we don't get a lot of attendance. So to answer your question, is there have been competing priorities that have outweighed this, unfortunately, in the recent past or the distant past. Pardon me? That pesky little pandemic didn't help matters. Yeah.
So before we get back in 1 second, before we depart after Doug speaks, is there anybody who hasn't spoken yet that would like to speak? Anybody? So just Andy and Doug. You gentlemen are okay? Okay.
It's on? Okay. So my concern is about the manner in which people are connected to whatever is concerning their projects. So whether it's this project at the bottom of Ocean or the police station in front of their house or the Sunset across from Sunset Center, people need to be notified. So my concern is that in this day and age, there's really no excuse to be able to contact people. Everybody's got phone numbers, emails, addresses, post office boxes. So we need to figure out the best way of communicating with our constituents, really. And I know there's a lot of people here that don't live here, so a house has an AP number, and on that AP number, it has an address, right? How to the best contact people. So then I would think you use that and you send a registered letter so that the people, this is important from what I'm hearing from Doug. I'm not involved in this, and the people need to be notified in a timely manner, and there should be no more loopholes on people not getting their information. That's a concern for me, no matter what it's dealing with. So that needs to be addressed.
I just have one quick question. Best case scenario, it runs right through the ad hoc, goes to council, PG&E approves it. What kind of a timeline would we be looking at for construction? 1 year, 1 month, 2 years?
They can't even provide it.
Right. It's going to be the agency. It's going to be a little over a year. That's a ridiculously short time.
What we tell new construction, and again, we've got some testimonials here. What we tell people when they pull a permit to build a brand new house or remodel, Doug, we say the first thing that you do is get in touch with PG&E for the final hookup. And how many, you were in construction for 3 years?
Still going, and,
Oh,
but yeah,
till you
finally got underground, but it took 3 years.
3 years. So 3 years, and again, this is So this.
They actually had it. It could have been shorter, but they gave it to someone else.
Yeah, that was great.
It's more complicated.
So hopefully within Brandon's lifetime, this project will happen by 2033. And how long would it take you typically, Dale?
It's going to be very short.
No. When you would build a house,
I didn't put power lines underground. I mean, we just undergrounded from
the utility. Yeah, well, Tasha did the same, and it took years.
You know who the person is. You just have to get that person to show up.
We tried. It's a major issue. It's a major issue, Doug.
Do you want to talk about what we've done so far?
With respect to outreach and communication, yeah. So Javier, so the Councilmember Baron asked me if I would talk briefly about what we've done with respect to outreach. Excuse me. And Javier talked a little bit about, we walked down there, we hand-delivered postcards, we put notices in the paper. But also, to Andy's point, what we do is we do pull information relative to assessors' parcel numbers, APNs. As everybody knows, information is only as good as what's put into it. So a lot of times we will send, not a lot of times, we always send to the address on file that we have associated with an APN. They may not be a good address anymore because they've changed it, they've moved, they've whatever. And so we do our best to try to get in touch with folks, but we use every resource we have. We pull records from the county. We have our own files and records here of people's addresses, but they do change, unfortunately. And a lot of the houses down by this area, they're second, third, fourth homes, and so they're owned by LLCs, corporations. They're not a person, sitting at home waiting for their mail to come. They're a corporation, and so the address could be one of many different places. And so we do try our best, but because of the day and age we're in with how home ownership is, it's actually not as easy as it sounds. It probably was easier back in the day when every house was owned by a person or some people that lived somewhere where you could actually get to them. And that's not the case anymore.
But if you send it registered, at least if somebody comes to a meeting, you're going to say, I sent it, somebody signed for it, or you're going to know if somebody didn't get it.
So we don't send them registered, you're right, but we do keep a record on file of all the mailings that went out. So we track them. We just don't, the city just doesn't pay for, we send thousands of notices a year. So the city just doesn't budget for sending registered letters for every single one of those. That would be a very expensive endeavor. But we do track them. We do track all the mailings that go out and the addresses in which they went to. We get a stack. Just a second, Dale. We get a stack back almost every time we notice, especially when it's a big notice when we send out for like a big community thing. We get return to sender kind of stuff, and then we mark that in our records and try to find a better address. Yeah, that's correct. Property taxes do get paid. Yep.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, Dr. White, because we had the case, 6 months ago with the tree that on private property that the city eventually paid to remove, and we tried over the course of months to get in touch with that property owner through the APM, through every means that we could, and we were unsuccessful. And yet, the address on the property tax file didn't work. And as the Pinecone reported, 3 weeks after the city paid to have the tree taken out, the person paid their property taxes. So even the property tax, even the address on the property tax file often is just not good.
If you don't hear back from 4 homeowners, what are you going to do?
We'll do our best to hear from them.
Thanks. So we have one person here that's impacted, right? Yeah, so the way we did it is we sort of took the neighbors that knew people and then just networked with the neighbors, and they ended up contacting, do you know this person? And we got 24 people. So it can happen if the neighbors get involved. It's obviously the best way.
So all finished. Are we finished for this evening, or I'm seeing Councilmember Dramov nodding her head yes?
Staff would like to recommend, ask, I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir. Just before you wrap up, I just want to make sure staff would request that we get a recommendation from the ad hoc committee to move to city council. So do you want to flip over to the screen just so we have the staff recommendation up on there? Sorry, sir.
No worries.
Yes, I think we should continue this discussion at the council. So my recommendation would be yes.
Yes, I'll read the whole thing. So the ad hoc committee recommends the establishment of an underground utility district between Del Mar parking lot at the west end of Ocean Avenue and San Antonio Avenue, and potential overhead to underground power line conversion project within the district utilizing Rule 20A allocated credits. And so that will go to the full council for a vote prior to the December 2024 expiration.
You could add, additional outreach and education as we always do, but if you'd like to add it to the motion, we would keep that.
Certainly, I absolutely would support additional outreach and education. And Doug, hopefully you can help us with that, with the people that you know, so that way we can get in touch with them.
I know the folks want to. I don't know who owns the house.
Well, at least
I don't know who has Tony's house, and I don't know who the people.
even one is a help. You never know. And now that we're getting some publicity through this, hopefully we can help, somehow get word to the rest of the people.
They're writing a check to somebody.
We only have one tenant this time.
They're an LLC, they might be able to help.
Well, if there's a gardener there, if they owe you $5 million, I bet you find them. So I think we got to work harder to find them, because what are you going to do if you can't find them?
I heard the rule is if you're not here, then you pay for the guy that is here. Just kidding.
Thank you, everyone, for participating.